ROSPA is funded by Transport Scotland to manage SCORSA, a source of free advice, resources and member engagement on all aspects of managing occupational road risk. The nature of work is changing with the growth of digital platforms accessible via smartphones, giving rise to new independent ways of working. The gig economy is a result of the rise of these new forms of technology. The gig economy involves people who do not get paid a salary but get paid per gig or piece rate, whereby service providers are linked to service users, typically via a mobile app. Drivers and riders who earn money in this way are often referred to as lifestyle workers or flex couriers or workers because they can choose when they work to fit in with other commitments. Drivers or riders working as part of the gig economy travel in vehicles, on motorcycles and on pedal cycles. Common examples of those working in the gig economy include those using their private vehicle to provide a taxi service, parcel couriers and fast food delivery drivers and riders. The road is a workplace, but what more do we know about this growing area of driving for work? Dr. Cara McDonnell, ROSPA Policy Advisor and Head of ROSPA Scotland, has some more information to share with us today. So, the road as a workplace. How many people in GB have worked in the gig economy in the last 12 months?
Well, thanks for asking that. It's been estimated that 162 million people worldwide are employed as independent workers, with official statistics suggesting there are 5 million people in the UK are self-employed. It's not known how many of these 5 million are working as part of the gig economy, however. Official statistics estimate that around 4.4% of the Great Britain population have completed some work for the gig economy within the last 12 months, and that equates to around 2.8 million people. It's widely recognised that driving is one of the most dangerous activities that we do, and indeed driving work tends to be riskier than driving for private reasons. At-work drivers crash more often, even after their higher mileages are taken into account, and they're more likely to take risks and to be at fault when they're involved in a collision. It's not just at-work drivers and riders who suffer in work-related collisions. In fact, their passengers, pedestrians, pedal cyclists, motorcyclists and people in other vehicles are more often killed or injured in these crashes than the at-work driver or rider themselves. Gig economy workers are regarded these crashes are not just due to driving skills and attitudes, but also to the nature of the driving that at-work drivers are required to do. This may, for example, include unsafe schedules, causing fatigue and time pressures, or indeed having to respond to work messages while riding or driving.
Thank you. And what health responsibility do businesses operating in the gig economy have to workers?
Gig economy workers are regarded as self-employed and are not covered by employment law. However, gig economy workers are responsible for managing work in a way that does not create health and safety risks for themselves and others. In relation to employers' responsibilities, the employer responsibility lies with the duty holder. This is the person or organisation who's responsible for a worker's day-to-day safety in the environment where they work. Although gig economy workers are often labelled as self-employed, their employer still has health and safety responsibilities. So consequently, businesses operating in the gig economy should ensure they hold adequate insurance for workers whose actions for whom they may be held responsible, conduct a risk assessment to properly identify risks, and implement measures to ensure that workers are properly trained, have appropriate safety equipment and are not incentivised to take actions which may increase the risk of harm to others. The Health and Safety Executive's Driving at Work guidelines quite clearly state that health and safety law applies to on-the-road work activities. This should be effectively managed within a health and safety system. Therefore, your employer needs to ensure that you are legally entitled to drive or ride the vehicle and are properly trained, competent, fit to drive or ride it safely.
Thank you. And as a worker in the gig economy, do you need business use insurance cover?
Workers within the gig economy certainly do have to take ownership and indeed play their part. So whether you're a driver or rider, you have to ensure you're properly licensed, insured for work, fit to drive, plan your journey safely and indeed comply with traffic laws. If you use your vehicle for work, not commuting, your motor insurance policy must include business use cover. And as an employee, you must understand and follow your employer's driving for work policies. Now, the type of information that's covered within these policies and procedures relates to whether your vehicle is registered, taxed and has a valid MOT certificate and indeed is insured. Regular driving licence checks to ensure it remains valid for the vehicle you're driving. And in terms of safe driving, you include vehicle checks, journey planning, driver assessment and training, driver fitness, speed, alcohol and drugs, and the use of mobile phones and or other distractions, and also including if you carry passengers, passenger safety issues and where things go wrong, the importance of reporting accidents and incidents.
Thank you. You mentioned journey planning. What pre-operational checks should be carried out prior to starting work?
It's hugely important, the vehicle condition, and this can extend from motor vehicles to powered two-wheelers to person-powered two-wheelers. The vehicle condition, there is a responsibility for ensuring the vehicle you're driving or riding is in a safe, legal and roadworthy condition. So before driving any vehicle, check your tyres are undamaged, there are no cuts and bulges, they're at their correct pressure and have sufficient tread depth. There are no signs of vehicle damage, and before you start the engine, check oil, coolant and windscreen wash levels are correct. Check the brakes are working, the lights and indicators are working, windows and windscreens are not damaged, windscreen wipers and washers are indeed working also, and check that mirrors are correctly positioned. Once you're in the vehicle, you need to ensure you're able to see and reach all of the vehicle controls comfortably, that you have all good, all-round, unobstructed visibility, that you're not obstructed by objects such as stickers or devices such as satellite navigation systems. And if you do have a sat-nav, make sure it's not placed where it may be hit and flung forward in the event that the airbags are deployed.
Thank you. And who's responsible for ensuring that loads carried are legal and safe?
In terms of safe loading, all drivers must ensure their vehicle is loaded safely. It's illegal and dangerous to drive a vehicle that's overloaded or has an insecure load. And as the driver, you are responsible for ensuring any load you carry is legal and safe, even although it was loaded by another person. Best practice is to put items in the boot rather than the passenger compartment and to distribute the load evenly. You should ensure the rear seat backs are secure, and if you're not carrying passengers, consider engaging the seat belts across the rear seats for extra security. Keep a clear view to the rear by not packing above the line of the seats. And you should also avoid placing loose items on the dashboard or the rear parcel shelf, as these will indeed become missiles in the event of a collision. Keep the footwells clear and consider whether the vehicle drive for work is indeed suitable. If large or heavy loads are carried regularly, a van should be used rather than cramming items into a car. And for van use, consider the size, shape and weight of typical loads to be carried and how easily the van can be loaded and unloaded. So lots of factors to consider there around about safe loading, but as the driver, you're responsible for ensuring any load you carry is legal and safe, even if it was loaded by another person.
Thank you. And what about cycle helmets? Cycle helmet or no cycle helmet?
I'll just take a few moments as well just to expand on the types of checks that you should be carrying out in terms of regularly checking and maintaining a pedal cycle. Again, wheels, if you have a quick release wheel, make sure it's firmly locked. Check the spokes individually to make sure none have worked loose, and indeed check the tyres for cracks, bulges, foreign objects and general wear. It's important with pedal cyclists that the brakes are functional, that the handlebars are correctly positioned, that pedals rotate so they spin freely, and again there is no sign of wear in either the pedal or the crank. In terms of the chain, make sure it's well oiled with no visible rust and that the links are not damaged or out of place. And important as we've now moved into the winter months, front and rear lights. At night, your bike must have white front and red rear lights. Check they work correctly and give a good bright light. And in answer to your question, legally you don't have to wear a cycle helmet, and this is a matter of choice, although it will provide you with some level of head protection in the event of a collision. Check to see what the organisation's policy is regarding helmet use.
Thank you. And as a motorcycle or moped user in the gig economy, do you need to wear high visibility clothing?
Many of those who work or ride for the gig economy use motorbikes as part of their job, particularly in the food delivery industry, and many riders use smaller bikes, less than 125cc or mopeds. I think firstly it's important to highlight that to ride on public roads you need to get a provisional licence and then complete compulsory basic training to get a certificate. You must indeed pass both parts of your practical test within 2 years of taking the theory test. If you don't, you'll have to start the process again. You must display L plates and you must not carry passengers. The use of high visibility clothing is not a legal requirement. Check to see whether this and other protective clothing such as gloves are provided, and consider your own conspicuity.
Thank you. And journey planning and driver fatigue. When are you most likely to feel sleepy?
Yeah. Journey planning is a really important part of all driving and riding to prevent you becoming tired on your journey. It's particularly important when driving or riding for work, as you may be driving or riding for a longer period of time than you used to. So I think it's important to consider that you're most likely to feel sleepy when driving on long journeys on monotonous roads between the hours of 2 AM and 6 AM or between 2 PM and 4 PM, after having less sleep than normal, also after drinking alcohol or taking medicines that cause drowsiness, and indeed on journeys home after night shifts. Your organisation may have some guidance on the maximum amount of hours you should drive or ride. If not, refer to EU driving hours, which are written for professional drivers. Although the gig economy drivers and riders are not governed by these rules, it's strongly recommended you do not exceed the maximum number of hours outlined in the guidance document. I think I'd also just like to expand there on the importance of, in terms of journey planning, checking weather forecasts and traffic reports before you set off and trying to avoid driving in poor conditions, following any limits set by your organisation, and definitely avoid driving when you would normally be asleep, and make sure you get plenty of sleep before your shift. Thank you.
And what about eyesight? From what distance should you be able to read number plates from?
The importance of physical and mental health in your fitness to drive cannot be underestimated. You must inform the DVLA about any medical condition that may affect your ability to drive safely. You should also discuss any fitness to drive concerns with your doctor and inform your employer about any health conditions or indeed personal circumstances that may affect your driving. In terms of eyesight in particular, in good daylight, you must be able to read a vehicle number plate from 20 metres away. That's about 5 car lengths, and that extends to 20.5 metres if we're looking at an old style number plate. If you require glasses or contact lenses to drive, you must wear them at all times when driving. It's an offence not to do so and may indeed invalidate your motor insurance. We'd also recommend that you have your eyesight checked regularly, at least once every 2 years or more often if your optician recommends it.
Thank you. And what's the drink drive limit in Scotland?
The challenges in relation to alcohol in driving include the fact that alcohol makes drivers overconfident and indeed more likely to take risks. It slows reaction times, increasing stopping distances. It affects the judgment of speed and distance, the field of vision, and even a small amount well below the legal limit seriously affects your ability to drive safely. The drink drive limit in England and Wales is 80 milligrams per alcohol per 100 ml of blood, but it's indeed lower in Scotland at 50 milligrams of alcohol per 100 mils of blood. And it's important to emphasise here that many drink drivers are caught the morning after they have been drinking. So if you were drinking late the previous night, you could easily still be over the limit the next morning. And even if you are under the limit, you may still be affected by the alcohol in your body. The only safe option is to avoid drinking alcohol in the hours before you will be driving.
Thank you. And should you check about if over-the-counter medicine might affect your driving?
Again, an issue that requires a conversation with your employer if you're feeling unwell, a conversation with your GP if you drive for work, as it's illegal and dangerous to drive if unfit to do so because of drugs or medicines. They can indeed affect decision making and driving and riding skills, as well as your physical and mental condition and behaviour, and significantly increase your risk of crashing. The penalties are the same indeed for drink driving. It's illegal in England, Scotland and Wales to drive with certain drugs in the body above a specified limit, and even a very small amount would put a person over the limit. And we also need to consider here prescription drugs. So check with your GP or pharmacist whether any over-the-counter prescribed medicines you're taking are likely to affect your driving. If so, ask for an alternative that does not, or indeed avoid driving.
Thank you. And how would your organisation respond if you believed you were unfit to drive for any reason?
I think that it's important that you can have that conversation with your employer, that if you have been feeling under the weather or you're meeting challenges, I mean, the current pandemic is putting all sorts of challenges on people and their work-life balance. So if you believe that you are unwell and you're not fit to drive, the most important thing is to have that conversation with your employer, explain what your challenges are that you're facing and allow alternative arrangements to be made. That might include moving the shift back later in the week, fewer working hours, and indeed perhaps an ongoing conversation with the employer until they're comfortable that you're beginning to thrive at work.
Thank you. And if you feel pressurised to exceed speed limits due to work scheduling, could you approach your employer?
That's another topic that you should be able to have the conversation about. We have to ensure that although the gig economy work can be pressurised with drivers and riders being paid only for what they deliver or the journeys they complete, it's really important to remember that you must drive and ride within the speed limit at all times. When travelling at higher speeds, you have less time to identify and react to what's happening round about you. It takes longer to stop. If there is a crash, it's more severe, causing greater injury to you, your passengers and any other pedestrian or rider hit. So hugely important to ensure that that you stick within the speed limits. And if that becomes a challenge or you feel pressurised because of scheduling, again, it's the opportunity for you to stop, speak with the employer and identify a safer way forward that might include reducing the frequency of deliveries during a individual journey or spreading the amount of work you're doing over a period of time so you do not take speed limits.
Right, thank you. And what's the penalty for using handheld mobile phones while driving?
The use of the distractions in vehicles are sort of manyfold, aren't they? The use of handheld and hands-free mobile phones is a significant consideration, particularly as that many of those driving or riding for the gig economy use a mobile app to accept work. However, it's vital the application is used safely and doesn't become a distraction, whereby a driver or rider continually looks down at the phone to accept work or follow directions to a job. Using a handheld or indeed hands-free mobile phone whilst driving is a significant distraction. It's illegal to use a handheld mobile phone while driving, and this includes using the phone for calls, texts, emails, photos, to go online or for any other reason. And to answer your question, the penalty for doing so is a £200 fine and 6 penalty points. Although using a hands-free phone whilst driving is not specifically illegal, drivers who do so could be charged with failing to have proper control of their vehicle. The penalty here is up to £1,000, 3 penalty points and a discretionary qualification.
Right, and what about documentation? What should you keep in your vehicle to assist in the event of an emergency?
In the event of an emergency, there are certain pieces of key information that you need to be able to gain access to. So in the vehicle, keeping copies of an emergency procedure that's been developed by your employer, the contact details indeed for the persons to whom you should report emergencies. If applicable, the contact details for the breakdown firm your organisation uses and any reference numbers you may need to quote, and also details of your motor insurance policy and contact details for your insurers. We would also recommend that you've got a fully charged mobile phone to summon help if necessary, but certainly not to use it while driving.
Thank you. It's all been very interesting, I'm sure very helpful. The resources that SCORSA have, they're free to members, aren't they?
They are indeed free to members. We can provide free advice and support in terms of developing company-specific policies. We have templates that can be downloaded by people connected to SCORSA who can develop then their own systems, and we're there to provide advice to support them to be implemented.
That's been really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.